Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. Generative AI aids academic writing by streamlining research, generating ideas, and facilitating revisions, allowing scholars to focus more on analysis and less on mundane tasks. However, it poses risks such as encouraging academic dishonesty if students rely on AI without proper attribution. Over dependence on AI may also diminish critical thinking skills, and the accuracy of AI generated content can be inconsistent, requiring careful verification to ensure it meets academic standards. Joining me for today's podcast to discuss what one company is doing about this problem is Annie Chechitelli, Chief Product Officer at Turnitin. Annie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
You know, with all the things that are going on with AI right now, we were just chatting before the podcast, all the, I think, terrific tools that Google announced yesterday, and they're not to turn this into a Google podcast, but a lot of stuff came out of that. We have the Apple WWDC event, which obviously will be kind of Apple's response to what Google did yesterday. But, you know, it's kind of an incredible time for AI, especially in its impact on academic writing. I mean, I would have loved to have these tools when I went to Boston College a few years ago, just 2 years ago, not too long. But you know, it's just some incredible things going on. And before we get into the topics of what your company is doing, what I want to do is let's walk the audience through your background. And I've got some slides here that I'd love to bring up to give you a chance to talk about yourself. And I will just say as a preamble, I find it fascinating that I understand that you're a big time avid tennis player. I don't know I don't think you're a pro, but I suspect that you're going to weave that into why what Turnitin does is so important. You got to do the work aspect. So anyway, I'll turn it over to you.
No, hello everyone. Thank you, Mark. Yes, I'm a Chief Product Officer at Turnitin. I've been here about 2.5 years, but I've primarily been in education technology for the past 25. I served very early on. I created a product so that institutions could have classes online. And back in 2002, that was very new and very novel. And I always make the joke that people finally use the product I built 20 years ago during COVID, but it sat until then. So really learned a lot about educational institutions and how they move and how they change. And then I went over to Amazon to learn more about technology and product development and really hone my skills around AI, quite honestly. And in terms of tennis, I played tennis growing up, and I came back to it about 3 years ago after taking such a long gap. I always say that my sometimes my job gets in the way of my tennis career, but that's not really true. But yes, tennis is all about doing the work, and the more balls you hit, the better you get. And there really is no way to shortcut that in tennis. So I'm really excited to be here and discuss both Turnitin and what we're doing and how that's evolving and what we're hearing from schools.
Well, I think that could be a life adage. There's no shortcuts to greatness. But anyway, let's get into this. Let's talk a little about your company and what's the origin. You talked a little bit about that. You know, you obviously have a pretty powerful background, given your heritage at Amazon. But let's talk a little bit more about that and why the company is doing is so important.
Yeah, so Turnitin started over 25 years ago. My husband is an English teacher, and I laugh about him being one of the first users, even though we didn't know back then I would be on Turnitin's executive team. But he started using it in about 2002. So Turnitin's been around quite a while, and it became a necessity when the internet became so prevalent back in the late 90s. Obviously, students at that point could just like pull up different things that were online and they would copy and paste it, and that would be their paper. And teachers were looking for a way, right, with this new technology to detect where a student might have done that to shortcut, but also just poor citing. We see a lot of times students just don't really understand how to cite information or ideas that came before them. And so Turnitin created a tool for this primarily copy text plagiarism And then that evolved over the years as we became more familiar with different types of academic integrity. So, really, a company focused on academic integrity and helping educators, specifically faculty and also high school teachers, helping them understand the different facets of technology that can be used to shortcut some of the work that they give.
Well,
Obviously, go ahead.
no, I was just make the observation. In my opening comments, I mentioned, I think I used the word scholars. And hey, folks, this is Mark Vina, CEO of Smart Tech Research. Smart Tech Research is proud to have Aura sponsor my SmartTechCheck podcast. Aura security software is the all-in-one digital safety net for the whole family. It's literally like having a personal cyber guardian that protects all of the devices in your home on a 24/7 basis. What's more, its AI functionality stands out as it constantly learns and adapts to threats, keeping your family and you safe around the clock. It's a must-have solution for anyone serious about online security. Stay tuned for a special no-obligation promo offer for Aura that will give you cybersecurity peace of mind.
Hi, I'm Anna with Smart Tech Research. Whether you're browsing the web, checking emails, monitoring your children's online behavior, spam calls and identity protection, and conducting online transactions, Aura has your back, ensuring a secure and seamless experience every time. Aura's comprehensive security solutions are compatible with Microsoft Windows, Apple Mac OS, Android, iOS, and iPad OS devices. For an exclusive 14-day no-obligation trial version of Aura, use the on-screen QR code or visit the website shown here. Aura is the smart, simple way to stay safe online.
Academic types, and the power of these tools. There are kids in eighth, ninth, 10th grade already using these tools. So it's not necessarily. I mean, obviously, you're focusing on the college market, but there's a high school component to this. There's even probably a pre-high school component to this because the tools are just so prevalent. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. No, I would say especially high school, all three. So in addition to being not a tennis professional and my job at Turnitin, I'm also a mom of three teenagers, which has made this interesting journey for me as well, watching it from the parent side. All three of my children have used Turnitin or their teachers use Turnitin during their high school. It's interesting to see if we start seeing it before ninth grade, but they all started around ninth grade where teachers were looking to use Turnitin to help them have conversations with students. But yeah, it's evolving fast. So, throughout those 25 years, we also work a lot with contract cheating. People don't realize there's such thing as essay mills. Now with the internet, you can kind of outsource your paper to somebody who writes it overseas and they send it back and working to detect that. I know it's very common now. And then as that evolved, obviously November 30th, 2022, things changed very rapidly with the onset of ChatGPT 3.5 and how it can be used. And I think that teachers were very afraid at first, and there's still a lot of fear around the fluency of these generative AI writing tools, that it sounds so good. It sounds so confident. It has high level fluency and what that would mean for academics and for homework and for tests and for assessment in general.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about, and we'll get into this thematically as we go through the podcast, the instructor portion, because I feel I do have teachers are everything. They influence students at a variety of different levels, especially at college. I can still remember some of the professors I had that really influenced my life, and they need a tool. Frankly, it's not just, hey, obviously you're trying to make sure that the content that is being provided at the college level or at the high school level is being done in a very disciplined type of way, and you're detecting the presence of AI. But I feel bad for instructors because they need some type of capability. So give me your perspective on what they're telling you in terms of the tool like Turnitin.
Yeah, it's been an interesting kind of evolution. It's also understanding the different perspectives within a single academic institution may vary, right? Between
Mhm.
different roles as well as different types of teaching styles and acceptance and comfort with technology. But early on, so we're talking like November, December of 2022, there was just so much fear. Had an onslaught of teachers saying, "Help us. We do not know what to do. This seems really scary." am I going to be even able to have homework or tests or papers next year? We need you to figure this out really quick around how you can help us know that maybe AI was used. And so we worked really quickly. And in April, we'd already been working with AI writing. We knew generative AI writing was going to be the next thing. So I'll say that, like, we weren't surprised by that. We were surprised by how much the just the world in general accepted ChatGPT 3.5. Like, that was a surprise, but not that AI writing was going to happen. So we'd already been working on it. And they released AI writing indicator in April, so a little over a year now, to get out to teachers to help them understand where AI might be used in their students' submissions. And we were very clear that we didn't want teachers to use this punitively without additional investigation, just like anything else, right? We
Right.
think about a medical test or a smoke detector. These are signals for you to say, hey, you might want to look here. So when you have 200 papers or you have 100 papers, you can quickly say, these, I'm not going to worry about these, but maybe I'm going to have a conversation with these individual students or look a little bit deeper at the past work that they've submitted to see if there's anything going on that I need to be aware of and have a conversation with that student about. And so we released that last year. I would say through this year, so after April, kind of people calmed down a little bit as soon as teachers started to kind of see some signals of AI, meaning how it wrote. Yes, it's very fluent, but sometimes the facts aren't right. It can be very repetitive in terms of how it states information. And there's also this level, and it's always, changing and improving depending on the prompt too. So I realize I'm generalizing, and there are very good responses with generative AI, but sometimes if it's a general prompt, you'll get a very shallow, superficial answer with not a lot of depth around, here's all the evidence that I'm using, here are the different points of view that I've evaluated. And there's that level of depth that sometimes it's missing. But could it get a C paper depending on the teacher? Probably, right? And so there was that element of kind of evolved teachers understanding what the output looked like. That's still a problem today. We, in our research, we show that 36% of higher educational teachers or faculty have never used it. So that's to say 1 in 3 teachers have never used it to even just see what it's capable of.
That's
Which that
fascinating.
alone is a problem.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah, that is crazy. That is crazy. And that's a generational thing, I think, partly. That if you have an instructor who's probably, I'm generalizing, of course, 40, 45, 50, and they kind of came up the hard way in terms of sitting in a library, a dusty library, and doing all the research. And now you've got these tools that the current generation is using. I can understand that gap completely. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. And so some people have embraced it. Like, we've seen a lot of teachers use it really effectively. So some of the examples of using it effectively is a teacher will say, here's the prompt for the assignment, compare, contrast, or whatever you can remember your college English or history classes or philosophy classes, whatever that prompt is, put it in to Chat GPT, and then make that an A paper.
Yes.
Like, and so it's helping the student recognize kind of what good looks like. That's part of the assignment. But then how do you make that better? Maybe use it as a starting place, but also evaluating it. I've also seen teachers sometimes in a high school ask them to edit it, right? For tone and for style. And so we're seeing some teachers really embracing it and helping students understand how to use it in correct ways. And then some teachers will ask them to start brainstorming with it or just to cite it, say, hey, I use this in this form. And so the teacher can then have that transparency to be able to work with the student. So that's mainly what we're hearing from teachers. I would say right now there's this general sense of like, how much is too much? Right? How much of using AI is going to hamper your development of your skills around critical thinking, around shaping communication? At what point is it detrimental to you as a student
Right.
in your development? And we're actually hearing that from students now. What we're hearing from students is students asking us, saying, what's okay? So I think that question of what's okay is still very much evolving.
Well,
And what we're
that's an important point here, because the mission of your company is not to say, "Ooh, AI is a bad thing to do." I think the mission is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is how does a student use AI in a responsible way? because it can be a fantastic starting point from a research standpoint. And I use AI all the time for different, because I write quite frequently, and it's a great tool. Now, I wouldn't take something natively and just drop it into a Word document and send it to my editor. That's probably not something, because it can be a bit shallow. I mean, the engines are obviously getting much more profound. There's a new version of ChatGPT with a brand new engine that's even more intuitive. But there's also a piece, and you may address this, may factor into this academic integrity question, and I'd love you to address that, is comprehending a writer's tone and style into the content. I mean, if you've got a student who tends to be a very off the cuff, maybe a kind of a very, I would call it a conversational writer, and submits a bunch of content that doesn't sound like it's his voice or his or her voice, that's a telltale sign. Frankly, there's a problem here. But that, to me, is also something that is very, very important. It's an entire conversation about this. But let's also talk about the academic integrity piece, because that's very, very important in this dialogue.
Yeah, I think about this twofold. The first is around, right, the classic understanding of academic integrity is about giving credit to ideas and work that came before you and making sure you're representing your own work, right? Because it's important to civilization and to knowledge as it progresses to give attribution to the past and to say, here's an idea that was built over here, and I'm adding something to it and I'm making it better. I'm giving my flavor of it. And that's really how kind of knowledge passes over time. And it's important for all of us and how we create knowledge over time to have that level of attribution to things that come before us in the past and work that comes before us. The second piece is really about representing your own original work, because that's a representation of you, your skills, and what you know. And the reason that's important, besides you can talk about the ethical reasons that touch on the first point I brought up, but it's also important to make sure that students in particular are developing the skills they need to be successful, not just in jobs, but in life. Being part of a community where even today, there's so much news, there's so much disinformation, there's a lot that we have to process and come up with a point of view and be able to communicate that point of view and really break it down and think about, well, why am I thinking this? What's my evidence? What's my argument? How do I communicate that to others? And that is an important part of, I would say, of higher education, and even in secondary education, to develop those skills. I
Mm-hmm.
always say, as an employer, I also care, right? I can't hire people who can't push back on me, who don't know how to communicate what the right thing to do is and why it is right in this situation. And if students aren't developing those skills, it's going to be hard for them, and it's going to be hard for companies as they think about people in the workforce. And I think about it as like, and this is what's hard to teach kids, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to teach kids that one assignment, they're like, let's just one assignment. Like, I just don't have time. Like, I just stress. It's just one assignment. And you're right. One assignment isn't going to derail your entire productive academic career. But when does it? And how much does it? And at what point? I always think about it as like a game of Jenga. I don't know if any of you have played Jenga, but you have these blocks and it has the integrity of structure. You take one away, it's fine. It's okay, right? Unless it's like a really big, important one. But like, you're kind of taking out those pieces. And at what point does that structure no longer have the integrity to hold itself and falls down? And so that's the way I think about academic integrity.
Yeah, and the thing I would add to that is that I find the argument, well, it's only one assignment, I don't have time, my life is a very busy thing. I mean, back in the day, when I had to write a 10 or 15 or 20 page term paper, a thematic paper back in school, it would take weeks to do it properly. I mean, so
Totally.
today, with the tools that are available today, and by the way, that doesn't even that's not even a discussion around word processing and typing a paper up on an old IBM Selectric typewriter with correction tape. It's not like it is today.
With
That's just
whiteout. Remember
with
whiteout?
whiteout, or the IBM Selectric typewriters had that built-in correction tape, which was an advance back in the day. But I really think that the whole argument of my life is too busy and it's just one assignment. I mean, to me, the tools are available today with the amount of proper preparation. You can really do a nice. You really can't use that argument. I just don't have enough time. And again, it goes back to that whole shortcuts adage that we were talking about before. But let's jump into the whole thing in terms of the kind of the down the path here. Is how is Gen AI affecting graduates that are coming out of high school and college? I mean, we've kind of been bouncing around that topic a bit. I imagine that the right student in high school, the right student in college should be embracing AI in the appropriate type of way, and not be fearful of it and not abusing it, of course, in the way we've been talking about it. But give me your perspective of what you feel about this topic.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And so this is I'll put my parent hat on for the moment. And I have two in college and one in high school, and I introduced all three of them to Gen AI as part of my job. And my youngest probably uses it the most. She's a sophomore, and I think that's because she learned to use it earlier, and kind of she didn't have a habit, and it was always kind of at her fingertips, always meaning since her whole high school career. And she uses it very proficiently in the sense of she uses it to summarize, right? Really complex information. I always say summarization is like the best. If you're not using generative AI to summarize complex information, you're missing a huge advantage to life.
Right.
So she will have, like, if she doesn't understand a chemistry topic, that's like her heal this year. And she'll ask it to like explain it. So she's really using it as a tutor, not so much as a writer. And I think that
Mhm.
that's really important, that students need to learn how to use it. I think if you're a college or even high school student and you don't know how to embrace Gen AI at its native form, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment, then you're going to be in a disadvantage because other people have that tool. And I wouldn't want anyone to not have that equal playing field around
Mhm.
using all the tools that are available to you so you can best learn and acquire that knowledge you're looking for. I think that there are a lot of tools that aren't native Gen AI that are like incorporating Gen AI into their tool that are not always productive. Like whether it's a tool that will, if you take a picture of maybe an equation and you send it into the tool, and it will do the whole equation for you and show you the answer. I'm not sure that's the best use of Gen AI for a student. Maybe if it says, hey, I've seen some people say, show me how you got the next step, right? And kind of work through that. And so there's this element of somewhat of if students not policing themselves, but guiding themselves and knowing like, hey, I can't, this isn't going to be helpful for me if I'm just writing and copying the answer. But if I
Mhm.
tell Gen AI, like, I'm stuck on this equation, give me a hint on the next step, that's a productive use. And so I think that students are going to have to learn and have to be responsible in the impact of understanding these different uses of Gen AI. But they absolutely have to be aware and know how to use it productively, or I do worry they won't have all the skills they need to succeed.
Well, and I think the point you made earlier about preparing yourself for a post college life where you're going to be working for an employer who most employers, I can't think of an employer that doesn't value great communication skills, both verbal and written. You're when you're working with customers, regardless of the type of occupation you might have after college, you're not always going to have a chat GPT like tool to respond to a customer, although probably Google would like to see that one day. But the reality is that you have to use your brain. And if you an overly focused reliance on AI, I think can be actually counterproductive, frankly. And it should be used to grow your skills and develop your skills rather than replacing certain skills. But actually, that leads me to the next discussion, in that you've got ChatGPT just evolved to 4.0, a brand new engine, so to speak, a brand new large LLM, large language model, which is billions and billions of parameters. Give me a little perspective. You'll probably tie it into this in terms of you upgrading the tools. So when you see these generative AI tools, go through major upgrades, which are getting better, much more comprehensive. And I don't want to get too technical, but how do you evolve the tool to comprehend upgrades in some of these Gen AI tools that keep evolving?
Yeah, this is a fun one. I'll kind of break it down a little bit. So the
Yeah.
first is, um, even though thus far, right, even though that they improve in certain elements, whether it be visual or other components in the LLMs, the transformer model is remains intact. So the next word prediction hasn't changed much. Some of the things around it have changed, but that element of, for us, being able to detect the difference between AI writing and human writing is still very strong. If
Mhm.
anything, I mean, everyone's always trying to figure out, well, what about next? What's going to happen in a year? What's it going to look like? What we've seen is the better AI writing gets, the actual easier it is for us to detect.
Oh,
And so there's kind of this piece of that. Obviously, as we get into things like, well, do it in the style of Mark Twain. Well, first of all, if a student turned that in, a teacher would be like, why is this written like Mark Twain? Like, so I mean, those sort of things are cute, but like, do they really impact? And I think they're the main thing is, hey, at some point in the future, if you put in all your writing, well, can you train a model to be just like you? I mean, maybe that's a long way away. And still, there's a lot would have to change around how we think about LLMs to be able to do that. So we remain like we test. So that's every time a new model comes out, we run tests both on our effectiveness and also to make sure it's safe. We always run our we have a repository that we have for these tests. It's 800,000 documents that we run through to see if we have false positives, because it's based on just writing that existed before ChatGPT. So we
that's
always
interesting.
do. We
That's
have
interesting.
a level of control to make sure.
Oh, that's great.
Um, so then we have that. So we're always upgrading our models. We're also working on the tools. So there have been tools that have been created since ChatGPT that there are on purpose trying to evade Turnitin. These are my favorite. These are like students just go on TikTok, and these are sites that try to take output of ChatGPT or another generative AI and make and spin it even more, right?
Yeah.
So word spinner. And so we upgraded our tool in December to be able to detect this behavior. So students are always going to be creative, and we'll keep, we call them bypassers, where they're on purpose trying to get around Turnitin. And I think it's interesting if students actually pay money for that, but that's fine. We will stay on their tail because they like to brag on TikTok. And so we'll know, and we generally know when they're trying to change something. And then we're
You know
also
what?
bringing,
It almost sounds like AI content laundering. Like money
yes,
laundering, right?
it's like a secondary market
Yeah.
for evasion. Um, we also are working on other languages. We currently really focused on English, and what it would take to have a detector in Spanish. We're looking at that and doing the R&D around that. And so we're always looking at how do we add more signals for teachers. So it's
Yes.
not just detection, it's like, what are the other signals? Are there repeated words that are used in generative AI writing more than others? And we're starting to see some of that, not enough to put it in on any of our products, but there are words that are more commonly used. And so you can kind of layer on these different signals to really help teachers kind of figure it out. And finally, the other piece that we're working on is more of a writing environment, so that teachers can kind of see the process. So it's not about the endpoint, it's about proof of process. Show the teacher how it evolved over time, and the teacher be able to see where they copied and pasted, how long it took, all the different edits that were made, the different versions. And this actually helps students too, because students are kind of in a world where like, how do I show that I did this? Right. And it'll
Right.
all be built in. And so we're working on that type of tool as well to be launched later on this year, to help one more step to give more signals. And ultimately, and we imagine a world where a student could use AI in that. And so the teacher would see the prompt, the teacher would see what was added. And so really the next step is, I think, for all of us to have more transparency. So we don't know. None of us know how much is too much. And I'll just say that flat out. I don't know. Right. And so what we need to do is have teachers seeing it and also then judging the impacts maybe on their tests or grades, and to be able to have some of those studies that help us understand this type of prompt, this type of assignment, so we can have a path forward, because right now there's just not data, and the only way we're going to figure this out is through transparency.
Well, this is a fascinating topic, Annie. The thing I like to tell people is that what we're seeing with AI, the AI revolution, which is much more profound than anything I think we've seen since the birth of the internet. It's going to have incredible implications, and it'll be interesting to see what Apple does, as I said at the onset of the podcast, in terms of the response to what Google's doing. But I think you're going to be a very, very busy person, and we haven't even talked about other interpretations and utilizations of your capabilities, because it's not just, it could be obviously leveraged in other areas, even
Yeah.
outside of academics. And I'm sure that might be the topic for a
Yeah,
future.
we haven't talked about research. We haven't talked about journals. I mean, there's more.
Oh yeah, no. This could be a 5-hour podcast. But listen, Annie, thank you very much for participating in today's podcast. Thanks for taking the time, for our viewing and listening audience, for watching the Smart Tech Check podcast and making it a part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast, or use these on-screen QR codes to connect with me. You can also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Mark Vina Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great week. And again, thanks, Annie.
Thank you, Mark.